The air in the courtroom was thick enough with tension to feel like a physical weight pressing on every shoulder, a quiet storm vibrating beneath the surface as journalists lined the back rows, their pens and devices ready, expecting testimony, bickering, maybe even tears, but not the explosion that followed. Kody Brown, once the self-assured patriarch of the sister wives' empire, sat hunched over the defendant's table like a man watching his entire constructed world collapse grain by grain, his fingers gripping the polished wood in front of him until his knuckles blanched under the harsh courtroom lights, his face drained of its usual smug color, while across the room Christine Brown and Janelle Brown sat side by side for the first time in years, not united as wives in a plural family, but positioned as adversaries, as women wronged and finally ready to speak. Their attorney, Riley Stone, rose with a calm determination that sliced through the murmurs murmuring across the gallery like a knife, declaring, "Your Honor, this is not merely a civil dispute. This is a case woven through emotional manipulation, financial deceit, and a covert land acquisition meant to leave these women abandoned after decades of loyalty," prompting the stern, seasoned judge to arch her brows and instruct him to continue. But instead Janelle rose, steady, controlled, explaining how Kody had dangled Coyote Pass as their promised legacy, how they invested everything, money, comfort, security, for a dream he painted with conviction, only for Kody to scoff, arms crossed as he leaned back and muttered that they chose spiritual marriage, not legal entitlement, a thin defense that didn't so much as tremble the judge's composure as she reminded him that misrepresentation of shared assets is a matter of law regardless of faith structures. Then Christine stood, a slow, cold transformation taking over her as she crossed the courtroom with heels striking sharp notes against the floor, her face shifting from familiar hurt to hardened fury, and she held up a battered manila envelope, declaring that this was what Kody never thought they would find. Reporters leaned forward as the bailiff approached, and Robin Brown visibly tensed beside her attorney, her hands tightening, her gaze flickering like a woman who suddenly realized the volcano beneath her marriage had begun to erupt. And Christine explained how, only 3 weeks earlier, while sorting through Kody's abandoned belongings with her daughter Truly in an old shed in Flagstaff, she found a box labeled Christmas Day that contained papers, not decorations, not memories, but a deed for a private Sedona property bought during the very period Kody told the wives they were too financially strained to develop Coyote Pass. The courtroom erupted in whispers before the judge silenced them, and Christine laid out the truth, that the property was purchased through CB Management Holdings LLC, a company the wives had never heard of until now, a company with Kody Brown listed as the sole registered controller, and her attorney distributed copies to the judge and jurors, revealing that the document dated back 6 months before Christine formally left the marriage, a time when she was still contributing emotionally and financially to the family unit. Riley Stone emphasized for the record that Christine, Janelle, and even Mary had all been led to believe Coyote Pass was the only active land investment. And Christine's voice sharpened as she recounted the nights in the cold, the sacrifices, the trailer winters, the endless promises that development was coming soon, all while Kody secretly funneled money generated from the Sister Wives show featuring all of them, into what she called his escape plan, a future for himself and Robin that did not include the rest. Kody sat stiff, the smirk gone, while Robin paled to a near ghostly white, her lips tightening, her hands trembling subtly even as she tried to hide them beneath the table. The judge, visibly disturbed, pressed Kody on whether he disclosed this purchase to any co-signers of the Coyote Pass agreement, and Kody, suddenly stripped of bravado, muttered that it was a personal investment, begrudgingly admitting some of the funds came from business income, to which Christine retorted that business income meant the collective earnings of the wives and children filmed for public consumption. Earnings made from their lives, their stories, their suffering, monetized by Kody into a future they were not allowed to enter. Gasps rippled across the room, and the judge, unsettled, declared this a matter of serious concern that she would examine before allowing closing arguments. But Christine was not finished. She stared directly at Kody, her voice sharp as she said he demanded loyalty, demanded silence, demanded they endure hardship under the illusion of unity while he built a life beyond them. And she tapped the envelope in the judge's hands, saying it proved their loyalty had a price he never intended them to meet. The room stilled, a suffocating silence holding everyone until Janelle stood again, her hand reaching into her bag as she announced she had audio evidence, a private recording from August 2nd of the previous year, triggering Kody to snap his head up and his attorney to leap with an objection that was swiftly overruled since Arizona is a one-party consent state. Janelle walked forward, plugged her phone into the sound system, and pressed play, unleashing Kody's unfiltered voice across the courtroom, cold and deliberate, stating that Janelle was never lawfully married to him and therefore had no claim on the land, insisting she and Christine were resentful because he had formed a real marriage with Robin and that Coyote Pass was never theirs and never would be. A statement that sent shockwaves through the gallery as Janelle's recorded voice trembled with heartbreak, reminding him of their sacrifices, only for Kody's recorded tone to ice over as he blamed them for choosing the lifestyle, accusing them of making him into a villain simply because they were waking up too late. When the recording stopped, the courtroom was suspended in a painful hush until murmurs began rising from the back, and Robin stared downward, shaking, while the judge demanded Kody confirm the recording's authenticity, and Kody, visibly rattled, muttered that he didn't recall the exact wording, a lie no one believed. Janelle faced him, not with anger but devastation, her voice breaking as she described giving up comfort, warmth, even plumbing to support the land payments while watching him build a comfortable, secretive future for Robin, insisting that what she lost wasn't land but trust, revealing that it had never been unity but control. And as the judge glared at Kody with unmasked disapproval, she asserted that manipulation framed as religious responsibility would not be tolerated in her courtroom, her tone signaling that the fallout from this revelation had only just begun. The judge's final words still hung in the air, sharp and heavy, when the gallery erupted into an undercurrent of hushed disbelief. Kody sat motionless, no longer the domineering patriarch accustomed to controlling every room he entered, but a man stripped of certainty, his jaw tight as he stared forward, refusing to look at Christine or Janelle. He had always relied on charm, intimidation, or emotional spin to push through conflict, but none of those tools worked here. The courtroom was not a living room argument, and the judge was not a polygamous wife conditioned to fold under tension. The bailiff watched the room carefully, ready in case spectators lost composure, because the energy had shifted from curiosity to electric accusation. Behind Kody, Robin leaned toward him in a small, jittery movement, whispering something meant to calm him, but the cameras positioned in the room captured the tremor in her fingers and the strain in her eyes. She had spent years as the favored wife, shielded, supported, and elevated, but in this moment, she too was exposed, silently recognizing that the empire built in her favor was now turning to ash around them. Kody exhaled sharply, a barely there shake of his head telling her not to speak. Not now, not when the judge was watching and the jury was appraising every breath he took. Christine, meanwhile, remained standing, her posture rigid with the adrenaline of truth finally spoken aloud, a truth she had buried for more than a decade while performing the role of obedient partner, faithful mother, unwavering believer in a family structure that had never rewarded her loyalty. She stared at the space between Kody's shoulders, not with hatred but with a kind of mournful resolve, as if seeing a man she once loved spiral into unmasked selfishness was surreal even now. Her attorney placed a steadying hand on her arm, encouraging her to sit, but Christine shook her head once. She wasn't finished. Janelle joined her, stepping forward just enough to stand beside her friend, no longer co-wives but allies forged by shared betrayal. Riley Stone addressed the judge again, requesting permission to enter the deed documents and audio recording into evidence formally. The judge approved without hesitation, and the clerk gathered the items with meticulous care. Somewhere in the gallery someone sniffled, maybe a fan who had watched the family for years, maybe someone who had believed the narrative the Browns once sold on television. This wasn't reality TV anymore. This was real. Kody finally broke his silence, pushing his chair back with a sound that echoed through the courtroom like a crack in ice. "Your Honor," he began, but the judge raised her hand immediately. "Mr. Brown," she said, her tone measured, "you will speak only when addressed. You've had years to shape this family's narrative outside these walls. Inside this courtroom, the truth is not yours alone to manipulate." Kody swallowed, visibly stung, and lowered himself back down, but his eyes hardened. It was the look he often wore in confessionals on the show, defensive, wounded, convinced he was the misunderstood hero of his own story. But here, that look had no audience willing to sympathize. His attorney leaned in urgently, whispering rapidly, clearly trying to keep him from making impulsive statements that could worsen the situation. Yet Kody's chest rose and fell with a simmering frustration he couldn't contain. The judge signaled for Janelle to resume sitting, but Janelle remained firm for a moment longer, gathering the last of her courage before stepping away from the witness stand. Her eyes glistened, but her voice did not break. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "I didn't want to bring this recording. I didn't want any of this to be public. I believed for years that protecting the family was the most important thing. But sometimes protecting the truth becomes more important." The judge regarded her with a rare softness, a silent acknowledgement of the weight Janelle carried. On the opposite table, Kody shifted again, agitated, his lawyer placing a hand on his arm in warning. Janelle continued, "I wasn't legally married, as he likes to remind me, but I lived like a wife, raised children like a wife, supported him like a wife. He may not recognize the marriage in the eyes of the state, but it existed in the eyes of God, in the eyes of our kids, and in the eyes of every person who watched our family." Her words settled like dust over the courtroom, fine, inescapable, and painfully visible. Robin's eyes filled with an emotion she tried hard to hide, fear, embarrassment, something softer beneath the surface, but she stayed silent, lips pursed, shoulders curled slightly inward. She had never expected to sit in a courtroom defending a man she once believed had chosen her exclusively because of love, not convenience or legality. Her faith in him wavered now, shaken by evidence she could no longer deny. Cameras zoomed in on her reaction, and though she kept her gaze down, her tremor spoke volumes. Some in the gallery whispered that she must have known. Others insisted she looked genuinely blindsided. But no one truly knew the inner workings of their home. They only knew what they were seeing now, cracks in the power couple's armor. The judge instructed the jury to take notes, reminding them that these revelations might play a crucial role in determining intent, motive, and the legitimacy of claims made by Christine and Janelle. She then ordered a brief recess to allow everyone, including Kody, to regain composure before the next phase of testimony. The gallery erupted again into murmurs as the judge exited, her robe brushing silently across the wooden platform. Kody's lawyer immediately rounded on him, whispering sharply, gesturing toward the documents on the table, clearly trying to make Kody understand the severity of what had just occurred. Kody's face contorted, somewhere between indignation and panic, as if he couldn't comprehend how the narrative had escaped his control so rapidly. Christine sat back in her seat, finally allowing herself a shaky exhale as Janelle squeezed her hand. The weight of the moment, the years of suppressed hurt, the layers of betrayal, they all lifted just enough to let her breathe. She didn't smile. There was no victory in this, only truth finally brought to light. Riley Stone leaned in with a quiet, "You did good," and Christine nodded, though her eyes remained hollow, as if part of her still grieved the family they once tried so hard to build. Janelle looked toward the door where the judge had disappeared, then toward Kody, who still refused to meet their eyes, and she whispered, "It's not over." Christine nodded again. "No," she said softly. "It's just finally beginning." Christine moved like someone walking through the aftermath of an explosion, slow, numb, not yet aware of the shrapnel embedded in her heart. The moment she stepped out of the courthouse doors, cameras swarmed, microphones angled toward her like weapons, reporters shouting her name in a frenzy of curiosity and hunger. Christine, can you comment on Kody's testimony?" Another voice shouted, "Did you know about the second marriage?" She kept walking, eyes forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her hands trembled, though she kept them pressed against her sides as if anchoring herself physically to the present moment. Janelle flanked her right side, silent and watchful, acting less like a friend and more like a shield. Mary hovered near the steps, her expression a mix of protective fury and heartbreak, the kind only women who have lived decades in the same storm can recognize. Behind them, Kody exited through the side door, flanked by security and his attorney, avoiding reporters with the ease of a man who believed he was still the center of gravity in every room. He offered a smug half-smile to one camera, adjusting his jacket as if stepping off a movie set rather than leaving a courtroom where his credibility had just been shredded. Robin followed close behind him, eyes red, mascara smeared at the corners, looking less like the polished favorite wife persona she'd always projected and more like someone who had realized, too late, that she was standing beside a burning bridge. She whispered something to Kody, but he brushed past her, more focused on controlling the headlines than comforting the woman who had defended him until her soul splintered. Once the three women reached the parking lot, they paused beside Christine's SUV. It was Janelle who broke the silence first. "Are you okay?" When asked where Celeste was now, Kody muttered that she had moved away, that she wasn't part of this anymore, but the attorney countered with documents showing financial traces linking him to her far more recently than he claimed. The gallery erupted again, whispers filling the air like sparks on dry wood. Kody, visibly unraveling, slammed his fist on the table, insisting he did everything for the good of the family, that he had been drowning in financial pressure none of them had understood. Christine finally stood, her voice deep and steady, telling him he had never asked them to understand, had never allowed them into the truth, had never trusted them as partners, and now that lack of trust had destroyed everything they built. The judge declared that the case had shifted from a domestic dissolution into potential fraud, concealment, and marital misrepresentation, and she ordered full inquiry into every account, every signature, every date, every transfer. Robin sobbed openly, reaching for Kody, but he recoiled, unable to face the one wife who had believed him the longest. Janelle wept silently. Mary stared straight ahead, hollow. Christine stood unmoving, as if her spine were forged from every betrayal she had survived. As the gavel struck for recess, the courtroom burst into motion, but Kody remained frozen, staring at the marriage license with Celeste's name like it was the final indictment of the life he once pretended was righteous. And in that moment, tense, breathless, heavy with truths long buried, the wives understood the most painful revelation of all. The man they shared a life with had been living a life none of them ever shared. Her voice steady, even though her heartbeat felt like a fist pounding against her ribs. "Because someone has to tell the truth," she replied. "Not the version that was filmed. Not the version he practiced. The truth that lived inside our home." Kody shifted angrily at the defense table, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. Now, standing in the parking lot hours later, hearing that reporter ask the same question, Christine realized she had an answer she couldn't say inside the courtroom. She took the smallest step forward, allowing the reporters to see her face, though she did not move close enough to invite questions. "I took the stand," she began softly, "because lies only win when good people stay quiet." The reporters surged forward, hungry for more, but Christine lifted her hand and shook her head. That was all they would get. She turned back to her friends. "Let's go," she said. But just as she reached for the car door, a voice called out, one she did not expect. "Christine." She stiffened. The three women turned slowly. It was Gwendolyn, her daughter, breath uneven, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something between anger and grief. She must have run from the nearby sidewalk or exited from another door. "Mom, wait," Gwen said, closing the distance quickly. She looked at Janelle and Mary respectfully, then returned her gaze to her mother. "I need to talk to you." Christine's heart dropped. "Honey, what's wrong?" Gwen swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Dad's going back in to file a motion. He's saying your testimony was emotional manipulation. He's trying to get it struck from the record." Christine did not react at first. Her expression did not shift. But the women beside her felt the air around them change, the sudden tightening, the sudden heat of a new betrayal. After everything, he was still trying to silence her. Janelle stepped forward, fury in her eyes. "Of course he is," she muttered. "He can't survive without twisting the narrative." Mary crossed her arms tightly. "He's panicking."
"Good."
"He should." But Christine
didn't speak.
She looked back toward the courthouse, the building looming behind her like a challenge she never intended to face again today. Her hand slipped from the car door. "Mom," Gwen whispered, "what are you going to do?" Christine inhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing with a resolve that hadn't existed an hour earlier. "I'm going back in," she said. Janelle's eyes widened. "Christine, you don't have to." "Yes," she interrupted.
"Ida."
"He has controlled my voice for long enough. I'm not letting him erase me again." She turned toward the courthouse steps, shoulders squared, coat whipping in the wind, moving not like a victim returning to battle, but like a woman reclaiming her life. Behind her, Mary murmured, "God help Kody. He has no idea what's coming." The story unfolds inside a tense courtroom where years of betrayal, hidden marriages, financial manipulation, and emotional destruction finally begin coming to light. Christine steps into the courtroom carrying the weight of a decade spent believing she was part of a united family, only to discover that Kody had been living a double life, secretly legally married to another woman while emotionally abandoning the rest of them. The testimony shatters the carefully crafted image he had maintained for years. Janelle testifies next, revealing financial cover-ups, secret land transfers, and years of misfiled tax documents done under her name without full consent. She brings forward evidence, recordings, texts, and contracts Kody tried to keep hidden. In the courtroom, she breaks her silence, admitting she always tried to protect the family even when they were being torn apart by lies. Her words hit the jury with the full weight of a woman who spent her entire adulthood holding a collapsing household together. Even the judge seems shaken by the depth of the deception. Outside the courtroom, the emotional fallout begins. Reporters swarm Christine as she exits, demanding answers, but she stays composed, wounded but unbroken. Kody exits separately, still trying to maintain the arrogance and confidence he once used to dominate his household, but now his public mask is slipping. Robin, once the favored wife, is shaken and lost, realizing the empire she benefited from is now collapsing around her. Mary stays close to Christine and Janelle, watching over them like family forged through battle, offering the strength she wishes she had years earlier. Christine struggles with why she returned to testify after leaving the toxic world behind, but the truth becomes clear. She is done staying silent. The courtroom has given her the space to finally speak the truth of her life. The loneliness, the neglect, the manipulation masked as family leadership. She breaks down only for a moment, admitting she wasn't strong for years, only compliant. Now she's choosing her own voice instead of Kody's version of reality. Just when the day seems over, Gwen, Christine's daughter, runs to her, breathless. She warns her that Kody is already back inside the courthouse, filing a motion to erase her testimony, claiming she is manipulating the court emotionally. It's one final attempt to silence her, the same tactic he used inside their home for years. Instead of collapsing, Christine straightens her shoulders and turns back toward the courthouse. She refuses to let Kody rewrite the truth again. She decides to walk back in and fight the motion head-on. Janelle and Mary watch her with shock and pride, realizing that Christine is no longer the woman who tried endlessly to keep the family together. She is the woman ready to tear down the lies that destroyed it. As she heads up the courthouse steps, Mary whispers a warning meant more for Kody than anyone else. He has no idea what's coming. The battle isn't over. It's just beginning. "Mr. Brown," she said, her voice echoing across the courtroom, "this is now a matter requiring full transparency. The court will compel testimony. The truth, whatever it is, will come out today." Kody swallowed hard, his jaw tightening, and as he slowly rose to his feet at the judge's command, The entire room leaned forward in breathless anticipation, knowing that the next words out of his mouth might be the ones that finally shatter the last remaining pieces of the family he once claimed to lead.